This video is sponsored by DistroKid. Hello YouTube! Today I want to get into the topic that I see the most here on my YouTube channel and in my social media in general, which is basically a comparison between Maschine Plus on one hand and the MPCs on the other. So this is the MPC 1 and the MPC Live 2. MPC X is also a thing, but I just don't happen to have it, so this is what we're gonna stick with today. And we have a lot of stuff to cover here, so let's get into it.
Accurate beats.
Alright, and I'm a sample-based hip-hop beat maker myself, so that's my perspective going in here. I've used Maschine and these MPCs ever since they first came out, so I do have a few opinions. But it's worth taking into consideration though that I haven't used these ones in controller mode a lot. I tend to use them in standalone mode instead, because I kind of want to see them as their own individual groove boxes or samplers that I can make full beats on, more than anything else. All of these ones can be hooked up to a computer with a USB connection and that way work as dedicated hardware controllers for the MPC or the Maschine software. That's a cool thing to do if you want to use any third-party plugins, third-party instruments, or maybe make them talk to a DAW or anything like that. Let's first of all talk about the differences between these two MPCs, the MPC 1 and the MPC Live 2. Where the Live 2 is obviously the bigger one with the full-size MPC pads, where the pads on the 1 is a little bit smaller. The Live 2 also has a built-in battery and a built-in stereo speaker, and you can install an SSD drive inside of it to expand the storage like that. And when it comes to the connectivity of the devices, the Live 2 just has way more to offer than the MPC 1. So this is in many ways the bigger brother of this one. Apart from all of that, these two devices are the same. They run the same computer inside of them with the same touchscreens, they are compatible with the same SD cards, they run the same firmware, the same software. It's not like the Live 2 is actually more powerful than the MPC 1, they are the same, but this one just offers more in terms of the actual hardware, if that makes sense. But on the other hand, the MPC 1 has more dedicated buttons on it, so it's a little bit faster to work on, at least for me, so if I have to pick a favorite between these two, I'm leaning towards the MPC 1, for sure. And I hope that pretty much covers the main differences between these two. Again, they are also kind of the same. Now let's get Maschine Plus into the picture. But first, let me tell you about this week's sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid is my preferred way to get my own music out on digital platforms and online stores like Spotify, Google Music, iTunes, Apple Music, TikTok, and even more places like that. I'm uploading my music and my album art once onto DistroKid, and then they just make sure that everything works from there, both in terms of finances and in terms of actually releasing the stuff onto the digital platforms where I want to be found. $20 a year allows me to upload an unlimited number of tracks, EPs, or even albums onto the service, and everything just works smoothly from there. Also, make sure to use the link in the description below because that will give you an additional discount. Thanks a lot to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to Maschine. And to be clear, this one is Maschine Plus. It's not comparable to Maschine Mark 1, 2, 3 or Maschine Micro. Those were USB controllers for your Mac or PC running the Maschine software. This one though is completely standalone, just like the MPCs, and that's where this comparison starts making sense. It's always difficult to talk about pricing because things just happen to change over time, but as of today in April of 2022, MPC Live 2 goes for about $1,300, Maschine Plus for about $12, and the MPC 1 is about $900 US. So that's what that is. And of course I got that a little bit wrong, and that's not totally accurate. Maschine Plus seems to be on a discount right now, so you should be able to find it for $1,200 or $1,300, somewhere around those lines. That means that Maschine Plus and the MPC Live 2 are kind of similarly priced, and the MPC 1 is a little bit cheaper. The MPC Live 2 gives you way more connectivity. It has a built-in speaker, a built-in battery, and the touchscreen if you enjoy that. Maschine Plus is more comparable to the MPC 1 actually when it comes to the connectivity and stuff like that. But everything is not hardware specifications because the overall workflow is where these two systems differ a lot. This one has way more buttons and way more knobs on it, and it works differently than these ones do. Comparing these two systems in general is a little bit like comparing Coca-Cola to Pepsi, Mac to PC, PlayStation to Xbox, or something like that. People will always have really strong opinions about these things, but when it all comes down to it, these two different lines of products are kind of similar. For example, where I think it's a little bit easier to develop a muscle memory on Maschine and actually learn the device by heart like that than it is on these ones. Just something like the CV and gate connectivity that's available on both of these comes in really handy sometimes for some setups. I've actually had Maschine Plus crashing on me way more than any of these. That becomes better for every single update that they put out, but that's still a little bit of a factor. Sometimes I find the menu system on the NPCs to be just a little bit slow. And if I've talked to 20 people who really hates the workflow of Maschine, I've talked to about 20 people who hates the workflow of the NPCs too. And even if we're just talking about the NPCs, some people prefer this one, other people prefer that one. That's just what it is. Both Maschine and the NPCs comes with a crazy amount of content when you purchase them. We're talking samples, one-shot hits, melodic samples, plug-in instruments, effects, and crazy stuff like that. Which one is better? I don't know. You won't be able to go through all the different presets and samples and stuff for weeks, whichever one you go for. And of course, that's also a matter of personal taste. Do you like the sound library that comes with this one more than what comes with these ones? That's impossible for me to try to answer. Both Akai and Native Instruments are working kind of hard to put out new updates for these devices. Instruments or effects or samples or features gets added all the time. And if you happen to want even more content, there are expansions both for this system and for this system that are kind of affordable and has a lot of really good stuff inside of them. And since the entire Maschine ecosystem started with a software and dedicated hardware controllers, I think that I prefer using the software for Maschine over the software for the MPC on the computer, but again, that's not something I do a lot of at all. But the question I get the most about these things is, which one is easier to learn? Which one is the one to go for as a beginner? Let's get one thing straight here. You do need to invest a little bit of time to learn any of these and to fully master them, because they kind of forces you to think about music making in a way that you might not be used to. This one works with patterns and scenes, and you put that together into pieces of music like that. The MPCs has tracks and sequences and programs, and you put that together into different loops. So please don't think that you can pick up any of these and just start making beats just like that. That's just not how it works. And I'm not saying that there aren't any differences between these two systems, because there definitely are. Just the fact that you're working with 4 knobs and a touchscreen on this one, and here you have 8 knobs and not a touchscreen, for your day-to-day beat making, that actually makes a big difference. In a good way, in a bad way, it all depends on your personal preference and what you prefer over something else. For instance, I wasn't very excited about having a touchscreen on my main piece of gear to make beats on at first when I got my first MPC Live Mark I. Then I got used to it. Now I can totally see the advantage that has, and parts of me kind of love it. Not having a touchscreen on Maschine Plus kind of makes a lot of sense in many ways, and some things becomes quicker and easier and faster, other things becomes more finicky and difficult. So let's say that I've recorded a few MIDI notes into the sequencer and then I want to move the notes on the timeline. That's totally doable on Maschine Plus, but just a lot easier with the touchscreen on the MPCs. That's just one thing. But I would say that the overall navigation and browsing system is a little bit easier on Maschine than on these ones. So again, there are a lot of pros and cons with Maschine Plus, and there are a lot of pros and cons with the MPCs. And with the 2.10 update for the MPCs, they added the Hype Synth, they added a Solina, a Mellotron, and a lot of cool stuff like that, as well as the vocal chain of plugins. That's a really cool addition. And Maschine is running Massive in standalone mode. It has Massive, it has Reactor, it has contact libraries that are compatible. And if I were to make a complete list of all the features here and all the features here, I think it would be damn near impossible to say which one is objectively better than the other. People are claiming that the computer that runs inside of this one isn't good enough, fast enough, efficient enough, or whatever like that. I think Native Instruments made kind of a mistake here by shipping Maschine Plus with all the stuff that it comes with. Now, let me explain that real quick. Sometimes when you load up a group in here, you get 16 different sounds on the 16 different pads, right? And in some cases, these 16 different pads has multiple layers of different effects applied onto them. So sometimes you'll find a reverb, a delay, two reverbs, maybe some kind of pitch shifting functionality, a compressor, another compressor, a limiter, a reverb, whatever, just a crazy amount of stuff like that. And when I make my own beats, I never use effects like that. That just doesn't make sense. And even if it did, I couldn't keep track of all those effects per pad on multiple groups like that. That would be too much for me. And obviously maybe a little bit too much for something like this too. Maschine used to be a computer software that ran on computers where you could afford to do stuff like that. In this case, maybe you just have to tone that down a little bit. And I'm not even talking about consistently thinking about keeping your projects light on the CPU or the RAM or whatever. I don't think about stuff like that at all when I make my beats, but sure, I don't put 16 different reverbs on 16 different pads. Who would even do that? So what I'm trying to say here is that, at least from my experience, sure, I've heard Maschine making a lot of crackly noises and not working good at all when I've intentionally tried to push it way above the limits. But for my normal beat making needs, that's just not a problem. Of course, that's not a problem with the MPCs either, but they don't have that reputation that Maschine unfortunately has. Now let's try to be reasonable here. Native Instruments and Akai are competitors in this range. These are pretty much the best groove boxes, samplers, or whatever you want to call them, on the market right now. I think that if Native Instruments decided to do something new for Maschine, Akai would do something kind of similar with the MPC series, and vice versa. Sure, someone like me would love to see a new version of Maschine with a built-in battery and maybe something else added to it. I would also love to see a new version of the MPC-1 that's a little bit bigger with full-size pads and a battery inside of it. I don't care too much about the speaker, but something like that would be awesome. And when it all comes down to it, I make a lot of beats in here, and the majority of my work is done on any of the MPCs or on Maschine Plus. I don't really have a preference between these two myself. It should be said that there is one functionality in the MPCs that I would love to see being implemented in Maschine in the future too. And that is how they help you to identify the scale and the BPM of a sample and get that right pretty much all of the times. That's really, really helpful and would be awesome to have on Maschine in the future. So come on, Accurate, which one's better? Yeah, that's what I can't really say for sure, because that depends on who you are and what you're looking for and what you like over anything else. Take the drum pads, for instance. They are more sensitive on Maschine Plus, so that should be a good thing, right? Some people hate that. And the pads on the MPCs are a little bit stiffer and doesn't bounce as much, so that should also be good. Some people hate that too. According to me, the main difference between these two systems has to do with the overall workflow of the thing. Either you like that workflow or you don't. And then you have these two options to go by, and I can't really say which one is better because they're equally good, they're just different. So let's take price into consideration too. And that's where the MPC-1 obviously is a great option here. It gives you a lot of bang for the buck and a really cool device with a lot of functionality for less money than anything else we talked about here today. But we haven't said anything about Maschine MK3 or Maschine Mark III, which isn't comparable here, that's why I'm not including it, but still, it's a product that's available if you want the Maschine workflow, but still doesn't mind working with a computer. A part of me kind of almost feels like Maschine Plus might not be the right option for everyone. It might not be the option for entry-level producers who might be looking at the MPC-1, just because of the price tag itself. But if you're invested in the Maschine workflow and you're a big fan of that, and believe me, there are good reasons to be. In that case, Maschine Plus is the one to go for, because it's the exact same workflow, the exact same thing, but just with a built-in computer inside of it. And if you're thinking about getting any of these devices to become a part of a bigger home studio setup, then you might be a little bit worried not to have enough audio inputs or outputs. And that's not necessarily a problem at all, because all of these devices can be connected to external audio interfaces, and that way get access to more inputs and outputs, both for MIDI and audio. So that's kind of cool. So finally, feel free to leave me on any desert island with Maschine Plus, the MPC-1, or the MPC Live 2, and I'll be able to make beats for days, and I'm gonna have a good time. But don't force me to pick one of these over another, because they make me work in different ways and makes me make slightly different beats on them. That's just how my creativity works, and that's cool to me. And maybe we need to talk more about the SP404 MK2 in the future. For now, this is it. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you got something out of it, and please don't forget to check out DistroKid in the links down below. And I hope to see you guys in the next video too. Until then, ha det gott!
Accurate beats.